Okay, so this video is to deal with the basics on working with your tiles. So here's my slab that I've constructed. Remember, you want to leave the slab, once you put it on the piece of wood with the newspaper on it, you don't want to move the slab around too much. The more you wiggle it, the more that has a chance of shifting in the firing and curling up. That's one of the examples I showed you of being cautious about. The other thing with these slabs is as you construct and build on it, you can draw out your idea or your concept and then cut it out. So I usually start by drawing, sculpting, and then cutting out as I go. Now, if you end up with an area like this, it's a little bit sunken and you can't fix it, then you might need to cut that off. I'm going to go ahead and cut around it just because it's a little thinner there and thicker. I also have clay for working here because remember the project idea. I'll grab one of the finished examples from the demo classes. Remember that your tile project needs to be about 5 tiles, either telling a story or working together as a unit. This one works together as a unit. It has our textures, multiple textures I've been using. It has sprigging, which is one of the requirements. So this tile has sprigging on it. This tile has sprigging. This tile has sprigging. Actually, these have sprigging, all the little screws that I put on there. Now, it also needs some form of relief, which is our negative space. So here, the line work that's been done here and here is the relief on these tiles. Same with here. And this one, not as much, just a little bit on these corner buttons. So you need relief and you need sprigging, adding to it, to make a finished design. I'm going to make just a real quick demo of one of these heads of these robots. Now let's say I want a circle instead of a square or a rectangle. So I use plastic templates that I find, which are lids that are different sizes for my circles. So I could go with this size circle, and if you remember the handout, this circle is 4.5 inches across, so it fits the guidelines of a 4-inch tile. So I'm going to use it. But I don't want to waste all my slab, so I'm going to put it in the corner and then use my pin to mark it to create the circle that I will cut in a little bit. I'm going to take another piece of clay, flatten it out, and I'm going to use my fettling knife to do clean cuts real quick, similar to the example I just showed you. And I'm going to make some eyes that are square. So I just cut a little square tab. And remember, just like other projects that you're doing, it's all about creating your own puzzle pieces based off of your idea. So I'm scoring this, putting my slip on, then I'll push it on the piece a little bit, and that marks where I need to score. Now, when you're dealing with delicate work, you might need to use a finer tool than the fork, which is the needle tool, which I know I've been showing that too in our live demos. So right here, and then push the eye down, and you'll see some slip squirting out the sides. That's not a big issue because it just tells me I've used enough. If you don't use enough, these parts will pop off. If you use too much, they slide around. So just enough is usually some of it comes out of the edges. Now, if you're bothered by the color of the slip, later on use the colored slips that in your kit. We're going to paint this later anyways, so that color is not going to show up since I'm using a little bit different colored slip for my painting. Now from there, I'm going to go ahead and look for tools. I'm going to do a reference of relief work. So I'm using the back of a fettling knife to make my lines. And then I'm going to use my pin to create his eye. And in my in-class demos, I've been using lots of different tools for the different shapes and things as I work. So there's my sprigging, and there is my relief. So now this tile has gotten the basics of what's expected. I'm going to, of course, do another eye and a mouth and finish this head. Then I'll move to a body and so on and so forth, just like the videos, and end up with a finished piece like this. I'm just reminding you about the steps of how to deal with this. The other thing is, remember how I do a lot of relief work is I use my pen to draw and create my relief line. Now later on, after this is bisqued, when we talk about staining stuff, I'm going to paint a stain, which is a colorant, and then I'm going to wipe it off with a sponge. This is after it's bisqued, and then the stain will just be in these lines of the relief carving that I have on this. So at this point, This video is just showing you these basics. In class, we've been going through and getting to our complete design like this. But I'm making this so you have the basic steps down. So now, I'm at this point, I already started pre-cutting a little bit. I'm going to cut around the head to free it up. And remember that you got to clean up your edges later. You want to wait till the piece is closer to leather hard than wet. Wet, you'll end up smearing the clay around on the piece. So right now I'm just cutting the pieces off like a puzzle, but I don't want to curl this up. I also will push down a little bit on it. Now I also grabbed, remember, the texture tools I've been showing in classes. So let's add a couple little textures to this. And I grabbed the rest of the stamp to make his eye. I showed one way to make a square eye by hand. You can also just take a piece of the tile or the slab that you made, and you can make the second eye that way. And you can just take advantage of creating your own puzzle pieces by taking the parts and shaping the parts for the face as you're working. And so you can make these template parts and then decide if that's the shape you want or if you want to change it from there. Okay? And of course, after you got the shape that you want, and just score it and put it back together until you end up with a finished design. Now remember that from the live online classes that I go step by step, and once I finish one of these tiles, I cover it up while I work on the rest, because I still want to do the cleanup of the edges especially. So push this down. And remember, I run the needle tool and drag it. That way it doesn't make a burr as much. There. Let's see. So there's his other eye. And the other way to check where to score on the main part is by just getting slip, like I've been doing, and into the score lines. Tap it a little bit, and that gives you your marks for this trapezoid to get put on. Though you can always change your mind. Let's say you decide you don't want a mouth that's three-dimensional, you want it flatter. You just smear this back, then just bring back your design and patterns that you created. A little bit. And then you can make a mouth that's more of a negative space mouth versus a 3D mouth. And then later with the colored slips, you can even change your mind again and create the mouth with just the colored slips.